Insidious has spent 15 years arguing with itself about whose story it's actually telling. The franchise has tried to walk away from the family that started it all, and it's turned right back around. Here's the strange part, moving away from the Lamberts never really worked, but going back to them worked even less. And now with a sixth film that seems to be staying away on purpose, there's a question hanging over Insidious that it hasn't had to answer in years. Has it finally learned the one lesson its own history keeps trying to teach it? This is the history of a horror franchise that keeps going home and keeps getting punished for it. By 2010, haunted house horror had gone stale. The genre was running on found footage and remakes, and the old-fashioned, atmosphere-driven ghost story hadn't had a real hit in years. Then Insidious showed up, on a budget smaller than most studio marketing campaigns, and reminded everyone what the genre could still do. Directed by James Wan and written by Leigh Whannell, this is the film where the partnership behind the entire franchise first clicks into place, a detail that matters more than it seems right now, because how much control these two hold over each entry is going to become one of the most important threads running through this whole story. The premise is simple on paper. Josh and Renee Lambert move into a new house, their son Dalton falls into an unexplained coma, and strange things start happening around him. The twist underneath that setup is what makes it work. Dalton hadn't just fallen ill, he's astral projected into a realm called the Further, and something else wants to use his body to get out. It's a small idea, but it's the right one. Instead of leaning on gore or shaky cam, the film built its scares almost entirely out of stillness. Empty rooms, half-seen figures, sound design doing more work than the visuals ever need to. And it introduces a character who ends up mattering more to this franchise than anyone in the Lambert family, Elise, the psychic brought in to help, played by Lin Shaye. Every prequel this series makes, every attempt to step outside the Lamberts ends up leaning on her instead. The film made its money back many times over. On a budget of $1.5 million, it grossed over $100 million worldwide, and reviews leaned positive. Critics zeroed in on how the film builds dread without leaning on gore, treating its PG-13 rating as a constraint rather than a limitation, and pointed to Wan's handling on pacing as proof he and Whannell hadn't just gotten lucky with Saw. It became one of the most profitable horror releases of the year and did more than turn a profit. It proved a haunted house story, told patiently, could still fill a theater in a way found footage and remakes hadn't managed to in years. Revisiting it now, it holds up. The ending still sticks the landing and the score is a genuine surprise, eerie in a way that elevates scenes that wouldn't hit half as hard without it. The performances are stronger than you'd expect going in, especially Lin Shaye, who makes Elise compelling from her very first scene. It's not a perfect film, but when it wants to be scary, it is. What's worth noting, watching it with everything that comes after in mind, is that this film never has to ask itself the question that ends up haunting the rest of the franchise. Of course, this is the Lambert story, there's no other version of it yet. That question doesn't show up until the sequel decides how much further to take them, and how much further turns out to be exactly far enough.
It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
But before we move on, if you enjoy videos like this, consider subscribing. I do these regularly. It would be appreciated. James Wan and Leigh Whannell come right back for the sequel, and structurally that matters. Insidious Chapter 2 doesn't reset the story or find a new angle into it. It picks up literally minutes after the first film ends, with the Lamberts dealing with the fallout of what just happened to them. That decision tells you what kind of sequel this is going to be. It isn't a new chapter, it's the second half of a story that was already in motion. The plot digs into what the first film left unresolved. Josh made it back from the Further, but not alone, and the family spends the film uncovering exactly what came back with him. While Lorraine Lambert and Elise's old team dig into Josh's own childhood brushes with the entity that's been stalking him since he was a boy. Where the first film keeps its mythology tight and mysterious, this one starts explaining it, tracing the demon's origins back decades and looping in time travel elements to fill in the gaps. That's also where it runs into trouble. The film opened huge and finished with over $161 million worldwide, more than the original, proof the appetite for this world hadn't gone anywhere. Critics were considerably cooler though. The complaint was consistent. This felt less like its own film and more like an extended final act bolted onto the first one, leaning harder on a backstory and jump scares than on the dread that made the original work. That's roughly my take too. It flows seamlessly out of the first film and stays surprisingly close to it in quality, helped by a stronger investigation angle and a demon that finally gets some depth. But the timey-wimey stuff gets away from itself, and the rules of how any of it works never feel especially clear. Still, as a follow-up, it holds together far better than it had any real reason to. And with that, the story the first film set up is structurally finished. Josh is free, the demon's identity is resolved, the family gets its ending. There's nothing left unresolved that's actually demanding a third film about this family. Which is exactly the position the franchise finds itself in next, and the first time it has to decide whether to keep telling this story or start telling a different one.
Why don't you ask your dice what I have behind my back?
For the first time, the franchise chooses to leave the Lamberts alone. Insidious Chapter 3 is a prequel, set before any of the Lamberts' hauntings, and it hands the story to a family with no connection to Josh, Renee or Dalton. It's also Leigh Whannell's directorial debut, the first time either of the franchise's two creators takes full solo control of one of the films. The story follows Quinn Brenner, a teenager who reaches out to contact her dead mother and instead draws the attention of something far more dangerous, while her father pushes a retired, reluctant Elise Rayner back into the work she swore off. It's also where Elise first crosses paths with Specs and Tucker, the paranormal investigators who later show up working alongside her in the original Insidious. This film isn't just filling in Elise's backstory, it's assembling the team the franchise had already introduced years later. It's a clean way to move away from the Lamberts without losing the thread entirely. Elise is the connective tissue, holding the mythology together, so the franchise doesn't need a whole new set of rules, just a new family for those rules to happen to. The film brought in just over $113 million worldwide, a real drop from Chapter 2 but still a solid return. Critics were split in a way that's unusual for this franchise, generally leaning more positive in Chapter 2 but still well short of the original. The general read was that it isn't as frightening as where the series started, though it earns credit for digging into Elise's backstory and getting another strong performance out of Lynn Shay, who by this point is clearly holding more of the franchise together than anyone in the Lambert family. I land closer to the critical middle on this one. It's rarely scary, the first half drags, and the script gets noticeably goofier as it goes on, leaning on the genre's most familiar beats rather than doing something new with them. What works is the mystery of it and Shay's performance, though even Elise's arc here feels oddly rushed. What's worth sitting with is that the idea behind this film is sound. Horror franchises step outside their core cast to survive all the time, and using Elise as the bridge is a smart way to do it. The problem isn't the decision to leave the Lamberts behind, it's that nobody quite settled whose story this was supposed to be instead. Quinn's or Elise's, and that indecision is what actually holds the film back. A distinction the franchise doesn't seem to register yet, because it's about to try leaving the Lamberts behind a second time.
Something we living people are not supposed to do. But someone followed me back.
2 years after Chapter 3 proved the franchise could survive without the Lamberts, it goes further and hands the whole picture over to Elise. Insidious, The Last Key is the fourth installment, and chronologically, parts of it are the earliest chapter in her story so far. Opening in 1953 in Five Keys, New Mexico, where a young Elise grows up in a house next to the prison her father works at, and where her gift for seeing the dead gets her locked in a basement and blamed for a demon getting loose. Decades later, after Chapter 3 takes place, now working alongside Specs and Tucker, Elise takes a case that turns out to be her childhood home. What she's really walking back into is her own family, including a brother she abandoned and nieces she never met. And the film treats the haunting almost as a way into the relationship rather than the other way around. It's the first time this franchise fully commits to a lead who isn't a Lambert, and it plays that commitment straight. No shared screen time, no half step back towards the original story. It brought in nearly $168 million worldwide, the biggest number the franchise had put up to that point, ahead of both prior sequels. Reviews were mixed, with plenty of the same complaints as the other prequel, thinner scares and a slower middle stretch, but critics were noticeably kinder to the emotional core, pointing specifically to Lynn Shay's performance and the way the film finally treats Elise as a fully realized person instead of a supporting psychic. I'd rank this slightly ahead of Chapter 3, getting more of Elise's background does most of the heavy lifting. It's still not particularly scary and the back half drags with some subplots it didn't need, but the mystery of what actually happened to her family is genuinely engaging while it's unfolding. 2 attempts to leave the Lamberts behind, and the second one clearly works better than the first. That's the state of the franchise heading into its 5th film. A version of Insidious without its original family had just posted its best box office and its best reviews since Chapter 2, which makes what happens next a genuinely strange decision.
Some people are afraid of special people. Your daddy, he's one of them.
After 2 films spent proving it could live without them, the franchise goes back to the Lamberts anyway. Insidious, The Red Door picks up 9 years after Chapter 2 with Josh's and Dalton's memories of the further wiped through hypnosis. Josh's marriage to Renee over and his relationship with Dalton quietly strained by something neither of them can name. When Dalton heads off to college and an art class assignment pushes him to confront his inner fears, the past comes looking for both of them. It's billed as the true conclusion, the first film to bring the original Lambert cast back together since 2013 and Patrick Wilson's directorial debut on top of his returning role as Josh. It earned over $189 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing entry in the franchise. It's also the one that landed hardest with critics and audiences alike, drawing the most negative response of any film in the series, with the general complaint being that a story this many films deep in mythology no longer had anywhere left to surprise anyone. That's roughly where I land too, and maybe further than that. The mystery only works if you don't already know the answer, and after 2 films spelling out exactly what happened to Josh, there's nothing left to uncover. It's barely scary, Elise feels dropped in, and the characters lean into caricature more than anywhere else in the franchise. The father-son material is the one genuinely interesting idea here, and the film barely explores it before rushing to wrap things up. Which is the part worth sitting with. This is the biggest earner in the franchise history, and by nearly every account including mine, the weakest film in it. 2 attempts at moving away from the Lamberts had just gotten steadily better. Then the one attempt at going back to them produced the least satisfying entry the franchise had made. If Insidious was ever going to learn that lesson, this was the film that should have taught it.
They can possess our bodies. It happened to me, and now he's done it to you.
For the 3rd time, Insidious chooses to leave its original family behind, and this time it isn't easing into the decision. Insidious, out of the further, doesn't just introduce a new family, it removes the Lamberts from the equation almost entirely. No returning cast beyond Elise, unsurprisingly. No shared scene bridging old and new, no gesture back towards the original story. If the Red Door was the franchise checking whether that mystery still had life in it, this is the franchise checking whether it needs that story at all. The film follows Gemma, a young mother who moves back into the house she grew up in with her daughter. What starts out looking like a gift, the ability to travel into the further, turns into something far more dangerous once she realizes she's just not able to enter that realm. She can bring what's inside it back out with her. When whatever's on the other side catches on, the one rule that's held across every previous film stops holding. For 5 entries, the danger was always getting trapped on the wrong side of the door. This is the first time the threat comes from the door working too well. Juan and Wennell stay on as producers, one more step removed from the series they built together, and Joseph Becerra is back scoring it, along with Lynn Shay, the other name that's been here since the beginning. We will see where it ends up within the franchise, but the pattern it's stepping into is worth stating plainly. Every time this franchise has moved away from the Lamberts, it's gotten a little better at being its own thing. Every time it's gone back, it's gotten worse. And even though that's a small sample size, it is the truth. Out of the Further isn't just another new family, it's the clearest bet yet that Insidious has finally figured out which version of itself actually works.
Between this world and the next one.
After 15 years and 6 films in, Insidious has a clearer answer to its own question than it probably realizes. Whatever Out of the Further turns out to be, it looks less like a franchise wandering and more like one slowly learning to let go. Which leaves an odd question for a series built around a door that won't stay shut. Does Insidious still need the Lamberts, or was Chapter 2 the real ending all along and everything since has just been the franchise figuring out how to move on from its own story? Let me know what you think Insidious should do from here, and let me know your favorite Insidious film in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives like this. Roll the credits!